Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining me to listen to my story. My name is Michael Davis, and today I wish to share a personal experience that has left a lasting impression. At the age of 65, I resolved to take a leap of faith and meet someone new in hopes of finding companionship for the next stage of my life. However, what began as a hopeful encounter soon became one of the strangest episodes I have experienced. Allow me to provide a little background. I retired 5 years ago following a career spanning over 30 years. As a secondary school mathematics teacher, I reside in a tranquil 2-bedroom flat in sunny Florida, while my only daughter Sarah lives far away in New York. My wife sadly passed away 3 years ago, and since then, life has been quiet, peaceful certainly, but often marked by loneliness. I spent much of my time gardening, reading, and volunteering at the local library, yet something remained absent from my life. I resolved it was time to seek companionship, not necessarily matrimony, but rather someone with whom to share laughter and memories. One day, a neighbor named Linda, who organizes our community events, suggested I meet Christine, a retired nurse living nearby. Linda mentioned that Christine was also seeking companionship and thought we might share common interests. Encouraged by Linda's recommendation, I decided to reach out. After a brief telephone conversation, Christine and I arranged to meet for coffee at a local cafe. As the day approached, I was surprised to find myself becoming nervous, as the notion of dating felt unfamiliar after so many years. On the morning of our meeting, I searched my wardrobe more than once, finally choosing a crisp white shirt and a blazer I had not worn in years. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, selected a seat by the window, ordered a cappuccino, and waited, feeling both anticipation and apprehension. Christine arrived precisely on time, exuding poise, and dressed elegantly in a light blue blouse with earrings. Her warm smile immediately helped me feel at ease. We exchanged greetings and sat down. Our initial conversation flowed naturally. Christine recounted her experiences as a nurse and her recent retirement, spoke fondly of her son in Chicago, and described her passion for cooking. I, in turn, shared stories about my teaching career, my daughter in New York, and my love for gardening. We discovered shared experiences, a mutual appreciation for quiet moments, and the challenges of adapting to life after decades of regimented work. For a time, the conversation felt effortless, and I found myself relaxing. However, as our meeting progressed, Christine's demeanor changed, revealing a more serious intent. She leaned forward and, with a softened but earnest expression, explained how much she valued my openness and honesty. She then detailed 4 specific expectations she would require in a relationship. Initially, I found her candor refreshing. It is often better to be forthright than to avoid important topics. Yet, as she outlined her first condition, my feelings began to shift. Christine suggested a 6-month trial period of cohabitation, a notion somewhat unconventional, but not entirely unreasonable, as it would provide insight into our compatibility before committing further. However, her next stipulation startled me. To proceed with this trial, she requested I deposit $20,000 into a joint account to serve as evidence of my commitment and sincerity. She explained that should the trial not succeed, a pro-rated refund would be provided, adjusted for the time spent living together. Her proposal left me feeling a mixture of surprise, confusion, and disappointment. While $20,000 is not an insignificant amount, it was not the sum itself that troubled me, but rather the underlying principle. It reduced sincerity to a financial transaction. I did my utmost to maintain a neutral expression, though my mind raced. I considered whether this might be Christine's way of safeguarding herself, perhaps due to past emotional or financial hurt. Nonetheless, the idea that trust must be secured with a deposit felt entirely wrong. Relationships, especially at this stage of life, should be founded on trust, mutual respect, and shared values, not on monetary arrangements. Instead of an authentic connection developing naturally over time, this approach felt transactional and businesslike. As Christine continued to present her reasoning, I endeavored to understand her perspective, considering whether prior experiences might explain her guardedness. Still, even with that context, my discomfort persisted. Commencing a relationship with a substantial financial commitment as its basis was entirely at odds with my beliefs. If trust was to be demonstrated solely through money, what did this imply about her expectations for a partnership? The more I reflected, the more evident it became that this situation was not aligning with the relationship I sought. One rooted in companionship and mutual understanding, not a catalog of demands. Despite growing unease, I permitted Christine to finish speaking without interruption, determined to be fair and open-minded. She then proceeded to her second condition. Christine outlined with evident conviction one of her lifelong dreams, an extended month-long visit to Hawaii, complete with a professional photo shoot to commemorate the occasion. She described idyllic scenes: beach walks at sunset, helicopter tours above volcanoes, and unposed snapshots meant to symbolize a new phase in our lives. Although I appreciated the romantic notion of such a trip, Christine was explicit that I would be expected to assume all financial responsibility for this extensive holiday. She offered to handle all logistical arrangements, stating that my only duty would be to relax and enjoy myself. Outwardly, I maintained composure, yet internally I questioned the practicality and appropriateness of such a grand gesture so early in a relationship. The request for a professional photo shoot seemed particularly premature, given we had not even spent an entire afternoon together. This expectation implied a significant leap in both financial and emotional commitment right from the outset. It was not simply the cost that concerned me, but the unbalanced dynamic where I would be called upon to prove my worthiness through substantial material gestures. I yearned for a different kind of companionship, one based on shared values and simple pleasures, not financial obligations or displays of extravagance. Christine then introduced her third stipulation, again related to finances. Should the trial period of living together proceed successfully and result in marriage, she required that I relinquish control over household finances. As a retired nurse, she maintained she possessed the necessary organizational skills and discipline to manage our resources efficiently. She would apportion me a modest personal allowance each month, with the rest of my retirement income to be managed by her for collective expenses and future planning. Furthermore, if I exceeded my allowance, I would be expected to to compensate by taking on extra household tasks, such as additional cooking or cleaning. At first, I thought perhaps she was joking, but her sincerity was unmistakable. The arrangement, whilst presented as practical and fair, felt infantilizing and controlling. The notion of surrendering full financial autonomy to someone I had only just met was deeply concerning. While collaboration in financial matters can be beneficial, complete control by one party seemed incompatible with the values of partnership and mutual respect, especially at this stage of life. By this point, my instincts strongly urged me to leave. Christine's unwavering belief in the reasonableness of her conditions, paired with her confident manner, made it difficult to confront her directly. Not wishing to cause embarrassment, I simply listened as she outlined her fourth and final stipulation. The last requirement was that even in the case of moving in together or marriage, we must maintain entirely separate bedrooms. Christine explained that after many years of independence following her divorce, she had grown to value her own space and feared that sharing a room would disrupt her sleep. She stated this arrangement was essential and non-negotiable for the maintenance of her personal boundaries and independence. Whilst I attempted to understand her perspective, acknowledging that separate bedrooms can indeed benefit some couples, this request, set alongside her previous conditions, served only to deepen my misgivings. What troubled me was not the condition itself, but the inflexible and transactional tone framing all her expectations, each seemingly crafted to her advantage, without regard for my feelings or preferences. As Christine concluded and looked to me for my response, I took a moment before replying. I thanked her for her transparency and honesty, then, as graciously as possible, expressed that I could not accede to her conditions. She registered mild surprise, then smiled politely, accepting my response without further pressing. I made my excuses about a prior engagement, and soon after, I departed. On returning home, I reflected upon the encounter over a cup of tea. It grew increasingly clear that Christine and I were fundamentally incompatible. Her demands, however understandable they might seem from her viewpoint, were simply not things to which I could agree without sacrificing my own values. I was also reminded of the necessity to trust one's instincts. Though Christine's decisiveness was admirable, our values and aspiration sharply diverged. What I seek in a relationship is sincerity, humility, and a willingness to nurture something meaningful together. If that is unattainable, I would much prefer to remain contentedly alone rather than forfeit my peace of mind. In the days following this meeting, I found myself considering the realities of seeking companionship later in life. Many of us carry emotional scars from past relationships and an understandable desire to safeguard ourselves. Nevertheless, I remain convinced that truly meaningful connections are fostered through mutual trust, respect, and shared values, not by rigid demands or financial prerequisites. For anyone contemplating a relationship at this stage of life, I offer this advice. Understand your own worth, trust your intuition, and never compromise on what brings you a sense of peace and happiness.